The ship never reached home. The waves of the Red Sea had calmed, but violence waited on the shore. Bandits stormed the travelers, leaving most of the crew dead on the sand. 2 young brothers survived. One of them was named Frumentius, snatched from their Mediterranean world and sold into the unknown. They were now slaves, strangers in the land of Aksum, just boys when they were dragged deep into the Horn of Africa. But history, church history, was about to pivot because these weren't ordinary captives. Frumentius didn't just survive, he served, and then he led, and eventually he taught a royal prince about the God of Abraham and the crucified Son of Mary. Imagine being torn from everything you've known, and instead of asking, "Why me?" you ask, "How can I serve Christ here?" That's exactly what Frumentius did. And from that surrendered heart, a flame ignited, a flame that would spread across the mountains of Ethiopia, down through the centuries, and into the legacy of one of the world's oldest Christian churches. This isn't just a story of missions, it's the story of a God who uses shipwrecks, slavery, and sorrow to plant something eternal. From the That's Jesus channel, welcome to Coach, where we're tracing the story of church origins and church history. I'm Bob Balch, and on Mondays we stay between 0 and 500 AD. Today we're journeying to the African highlands in the early 4th century, a place where the gospel had not yet taken root, a place far from Rome or Antioch. We're entering the kingdom of Aksum, modern Ethiopia. It was no backwater. Traders flowed through its cities. Its kings minted coins. Aksum was powerful, but its gods were local, and its worldview was pre-Christian. And then came a boy, dragged there by tragedy. Frumentius didn't come as a missionary, he came as a slave. But in God's providence, that slave would become a bishop. He wasn't trained in seminaries or sent by church councils. He simply lived the gospel in front of kings. And when the moment came, he said, yes. This is the story of how Christianity first took root in sub-Saharan Africa. It's about the man Ethiopians still call Abba Salama, Father of Peace. And it all began with a shipwreck. Frumentius was just a boy traveling with his uncle through the Red Sea, but he never made it home. Raiders stormed the shore, killing most of the crew, and it dragged him and his brother inland into the court of the king. But captivity turned into calling. The king noticed them, and instead of languishing as servants, they rose, one as a cupbearer, and the other, Frumentius, as tutor to the heir, young Izana. Frumentius lived his faith in quiet acts. Eusebius records that he encouraged Christian merchants to gather for worship and found places for prayer. He was preparing the ground, discreetly but deliberately. And when the king died, Frumentius became regent. He governed with integrity, and Izana grew up watching. Eventually, Frumentius left Aksum and traveled to Alexandria. He met Athanasius, who defended Christ's full divinity at Nicaea. Frumentius requested a missionary be sent to Aksum, but Athanasius looked at him and said, "You go." And so Frumentius returned, not as regent, not as a slave, but as a bishop of Aksum. It was quite the return, but one that would change the spiritual identity of a nation. Frumentius wasn't planting a Roman outpost. He was building an indigenous faith. He didn't copy foreign customs or demand conversion. He modeled Christ with patience and integrity. And King Izana responded. The boy Frumentius had once tutored, now led a Christian empire. Izana's conversion was public and profound. Crosses began to appear on his coinage, one of the earliest known uses of Christian symbols in state currency. Pagan iconography gave way to the marks of the crucified king. Now, this wasn't an imperial edict, no armies, no threats, just lived testimony. And Frumentius's appointment also had structural significance. He was ordained by the Bishop of Alexandria, not Rome. That tied the Ethiopian church to the east instead of the west, and that helped form a Christian identity that was shaped by African rhythms, not European models. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, it still reflects this DNA today. Ancient liturgies, fasting calendars, monastic traditions, and a deep memory of Abba Salama. Frumentius didn't start the church. He just helped launch a unique Christian civilization, and he did not do that through strength. He did it through surrender. In the throne room of Aksum stood a former slave. No army at his back, no political leverage, just trust and truth. Izana believed, and under his rule, the land of Aksum embraced Christianity peacefully and publicly. Temples faded, crosses rose. Even the royal inscriptions began referring to the Lord of Heaven. At that very moment, though, in the Roman world, debates were raging. Councils, creeds, schisms. But in the empire of Aksum, the gospel simply flourished. And it wasn't a diluted gospel. Frumentius had been commissioned by Athanasius himself. The Christ preached in Ethiopia was the same divine Son, Jesus. Now that's quite the miracle. No emperor sponsored it, no council planned it. God just did it through a man whose only qualification was faithfulness. Centuries later, Ethiopian Christians would face their own persecutions, but the church planted through Frumentius endured, unshaken, rooted, and wholly theirs. This wasn't Western Christianity exported, it was African Christianity born in its own soil. And the man who lit the fire, he came ashore as a slave. Frumentius's story turns modern assumptions upside down. He wasn't sent, he was taken. He didn't lead with strategy, he led with surrender. He didn't preach in stadiums, he taught in a throne room. And somehow it was enough. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church remains one of the world's oldest churches. It survived invasions, colonization, doctrinal wars, and political upheaval. Its liturgy is old. Its memory still lifts the name Abba Salama. Now, I know that Romans 8:28 was written long before him, but it could have been his biography. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. His legacy is not just theological, it's spiritual, cultural, global. Frumentius reminds us that missions is often not chosen, it's just lived. It's not about programs, it's about presence. Christianity didn't come to Africa from Europe. It bloomed in Africa early, through African soil, guided by exiles and witnesses who loved Christ more than comfort. As Andrew Walls writes, Christianity travels best when it travels light. Frumentius traveled light. He carried no prestige, only truth, and when he walked into a strange land, Christ walked in with him. Maybe you're in a detour today. Maybe your exile isn't geographic. Maybe it's emotional or spiritual or vocational. But maybe that's where God plans to begin something eternal. Frumentius didn't ask for a pulpit. He didn't ask for a title. He didn't even ask for survival. But then the world collapsed around him, and he asked a better question. How can I serve Christ here? That one question changed the Horn of Africa. So what about you? Are you waiting for perfect conditions? Are you convinced that your story has to start with strength somehow? Or could it be that God is ready to use your wounds, to use your disruptions, and even your captivity, just as he used Frumentius? The next open door in your life may look nothing like a mission trip. It may look like a delay. It may look like a detour. Hey, it may look like a disaster. But so did his. And from that, a nation was changed. Let's take this to heart. Be faithful in obscurity. Be generous in hardship. Be gospel-centered in relationships. And never underestimate how God can move through your exile. If this story of Frumentius challenged or encouraged you, would you consider sharing this episode with a friend? You never know who might need to hear it. Leave a review on your podcast app maybe, or it always helps people discover the forgotten stories of church history. So just follow Coach for more episodes every week. You never know what we're going to cover next on Coach, because every episode dives into a different corner of early church history. But if it's a Monday, well, we're staying somewhere between 0 and 500 AD. Check out those show notes for the references used in this episode. And if you check closely, you'll find two things: contrary opinions and Amazon links if you'd like to buy some of those resources for your own library. Now, as an Amazon affiliate, I will get a cut from everything you buy, and who knows, I may even get $1 this year. And if you'd rather watch these stories, you can find this episode and every Coach video on YouTube at the That's Jesus channel. Thanks for listening to Coach, Church Origins and Church History. I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.